We are living in very interesting times now because the world is going through great changes, the kind of changes which we have not seen in our lifetimes. So I thought I'll set some context to what is going on so we will be able to understand what is coming in. Okay, so this period you can say is a period of great reset. So let us see what it means. So we'll see what is ahead in this presentation is we understand the cycle of civilizations, how the rise and fall of societies happen, wealth concentration, and a little bit of understanding on how inflation works, and set the context for the incoming recession and how the world looks today, rather divided. And I mean, there is a good chance that the war which is going on now may extend and expand. So, if that happens, we will see what really matters. And then what we can do about it, navigating the waters. Okay. Okay, so with that, let us understand how prosperous societies and even very large scale civilizations come up and fold up. So it is called the Tytler cycle. Okay, so there is a saying which says, hard times create strong men, because without hard times, there is no chance of having strong men. And then these strong men go ahead and create good times. And these good times create weak men, because when people revel in the good times for too long, they become weak. And then these weak men actually create hard times. So this is a very macro level view of the great cycle. So when you look at in a little bit more detail, let us say there is a society which is having abundance of everything. The society is in a great shape, lot of resources and very little competition and good technologies and stuff like that. And so as abundance continues over time, people become, what do you say, more self-centered. So they say, I want this, I want that, and it is all about me. And the claims to property, money, all those concepts develop. And then over time, when that keeps on going for some time, so there is a lot of complacency about everything, because they think and experience a lot of luxury and think that things are all good. And so that creates the weakness. And then that develops into apathy. I don't care. I mean, whatever happens, it's all okay. It's all fine. And then they also say that it's not my fault about everything. And all the responsibilities are usually handed over to the government or somebody in charge. Some people who are put into the responsible positions, and everything is given to them, and rest of the people are completely hand washed about what is happening in the society. So this immediately leads to the government doing everything, right? So the governments take complete control. Here, the government may be a democratically elected government, or it may be a king, or whatever. So essentially, the freedom of the population gets curbed, and there is independence of the people get lost, and things like licensing regimes come into play. Even communisms kick in, right? So it keeps on going to such a great extent that there is a point of no return, meaning the government achieves complete control over the entire population. And that leads to bondage, right? So where people have really lost it, there is not enough strong men or strong resistance, and the government has full control over it. But this bondage will not last for long, because people are born sovereigns, right? So people start opposing the conditions once they realize what is going on. But they cannot do anything much because the governments have absolute control and they have all the forces to enforce whatever they want. So slowly, the resistance builds up, and there is a faith that pops up, and many communities start forming deeply moral gatherings, right? And then slowly they get courage, and then they start coordinating among themselves, and then what do you say? That the resistance builds up towards the freedom. And then this over time builds up, and there is a revolution kind of breakout. And then naturally it wins because there is no other way, because you can't rule sovereign beings over a very long period of time. And that results in liberty. And the prosperity again returns back to abundance. So this cycle is called the Tytler cycle. So it's a well-known phenomenon, and even from so-called the Roman times, this cycle has been going on across the world in many places. So if you look at the macro cycle of this nature, you can see very large cycles of 250 years each. We can, from historical point of view, the Dutch ruled for 250, and then the next cycle was British Empire, and the current cycle which is going on is the United States, the Empire of United States, and there is always a cusp, and there is always about 50 years of overlap between these these macro cycles. And now there is, and US is declining now. This cycle will be ending sometime soon. And then we will see the rise of new powers. So I'm not sure whether it will be China or India or a combination of nations, but definitely the days of domination of United States is coming down. We will see quite a few facts regarding this. So to give you an understanding of currencies, unlike what you may have thought, the stability of currency is very weak. Okay, so typically the lifetime of a currency is typically 5 to 80 or 100 years. That's it. So beyond that, there is no currency which has survived. So if you look at even the Britain, which is 129 years, it has lost more than 98% of its purchasing power. And same with Spanish currencies and everything else. And it always ends in revolution, and the currency gets destroyed, and a complete reset happens. And then the next world order starts. And in this cycle, the United States dollar domination is happening since World War II. And after defeating the European forces, United States came to dominance, and ever since it has been ruling. But its time is coming to an end. We are at the cusp of that ending period. So one of the great mark of the ending of any domination is through sanctions, right? The stronger somebody gets, the more dominating that country becomes, and they start bullying everybody else. So you can see this graph where the number of sanctions against all other countries in the world by the United States has been growing and growing and growing. So you can see many sovereign nations being completely destroyed by these US sanctions. Chile, Myanmar, North Korea, recently Syria and Russia. So all these sanctions has been going on. So this is a clear mark of the peaking of United States. And because of this, um, people are starting to move away from the dollar as a reserve currency. So if you look at these two colors, this pink color is the people have been moving over their trades from United States dollar to other uh, uh, currencies. And these green ones are planning to move away from the dollar domination. right? So already almost all of Asia and a whole lot of parts in Europe, they are planning to move away from the dollar as their reserve currencies. But as of now, the dollar continues its domination. Okay, so I would like to show you a small clip here. But this dollar domination is ending.
But the system we have now has actually broken down, only we haven't quite recognized it. And so you need to create a new one. And this is the time to do it.
In the United States, how worried are you about the budget deficit and maybe about the possibility of inflation?
Well, certainly a decline in the value of the dollar is necessary in order to compensate for the fact that the U.S. economy will remain rather weak, will be a drag on the global economy. China will emerge as the motor replacing the U.S. consumer. And of course, it's a smaller motor because the Chinese economy is much smaller. So the world economy will have less of a motor. So it will move forward slower than it has in the last 25 years. But China will be the engine driving it forward, and the U.S. will be actually a drag that's being pulled along through a gradual decline in the value of the dollar. So there would be a slow decline in the value of the dollar, a managed decline. And that would be the adjustment that it needs to be accomplished.
So as he says, it will be a managed decline of the dollar. George Soros is one of the billionaires in the world, and all billionaires know what is really going on because they drive it. Now let us understand what the wealth concentration is, right? So in any civilization which uses money, wealth always keeps on concentrating in fewer and fewer hands over time. This is a fundamental nature of money. You cannot stop it. You cannot do anything about it. And yeah, as I said, it is impossible to stop or mitigate or do anything about it. Because the more money you have, more returns you expect from that money. So you invest it and expect more. And because of which the wealth concentrates in fewer and fewer hands. And whoever tries to innovate and tries to become rich, they get bought over by the people who already have the money. So the super rich buy out all kind of innovations from lower ranks, who may actually make money from those innovations. So the more money you have, faster it grows, right? Not only you expect more returns, it grows faster. So more money gets to your hand faster, and that is done through the magic of compounding interest. We'll see more about it a little later. So what happens is someone with less money can never catch up with somebody with more money. That is the bottom line uh, in this whole game. And that is why wealth concentration happens, and it is irreversible in any money based economy and the civilization. Okay. So the rich get richer and the poor get poorer. And when a rich person dies, the whole wealth gets inherited by the progeny, and the same game continues from there on. So there is no possibility that it can correct itself and become what do you say? Uh, yeah, social justice thing. It is not possible. So what happens is the wealth concentration has been going on for 100 plus years now, and today very few people at the very top, they control more than 80% or 90% of the wealth in all the developed and developing nations. So as such, presently our world is being ruled by just one group. Okay, so this group has no boundaries of nations and what do you say, ethnicity or anything, right? There is no such thing for them. But the very concept of nation itself is to keep people divided and more manageable and keep the masses under control. That's all. And for this group, India, USA, Russia, China, they are all ruled. The same group rules everything. All the governments are controlled. Okay, so they own it. That's it. So democracy is just an illusion. There is nothing of this kind in real terms. So people are told that democracy exists and there is a parliament and so on, but that is all a setup. What do you say, to satisfy your need to feel free. But as long as you use money, this is just an illusion. There's nothing else. And these people at the very top, they have many organizations, like such as the world, I mean, governments across the world, International Monetary Fund, World Health Organization, Federal Reserve, World Bank, United Nations, World Trade Organizations, World Economic Forum, Council of for Foreign Relations, and a lot of corporates, right? The largest technology giants and central banks across the world and investment banks such as JP Morgan and so on and so forth. These are all their second ring of command. Okay, so these organizations help concentrate wealth into funnel the wealth into the top. That is practically the purpose. And these organizations and the governments help to keep the masses under control and keep on working and generating value for the top ring. So if you think this is too much, I'll show you who owns the world, right? The people actually who owns it.
Why are all the biggest corporations in the world owned by the same people? Apple, Facebook, Lockheed Martin, Tesla, MasterCard, DuPont, General Electric, Fox Media, Disney, Microsoft, Paramount, IBM.
And even all the top executives of these companies know what the truth is. It is just BlackRock and Vanguard who owns most of these very large corporations. And let us hear what Chamath says. He's a
There's
Facebook
about
executive.
150 people that run the world. Anybody who wants to go into politics, they're all fucking puppets, okay? There are 150, and they're all men that run the world, period, full stop. They control most of the important assets. They control the money flows. And these are not the tech entrepreneurs. Now, they are going to get rolled over the next 5 to 10 years by the people that are really underneath pulling the strings. And when you get behind the curtain and see how that world works, what you realize is it is unfairly set up for them and their progeny. Now, I'm not going to say that that's something that we can rip apart, but first order of business is I want to break through and be at that table. That's
Okay, so there you have heard it from the people who actually drive things. Okay, and all statistics across the world shows the same thing. You can look at these numbers. So just 1.1% of the global wealth is being owned and handled and controlled by 45% of the wealth is controlled by just 1.1%. The next 10%, 11% controls the rest 40%. And the bottom just 1.3% of the world wealth is being shared by 55% of the people. And as the time grows, you can see that the wealth becomes more and more concentrated into lesser and lesser hands. So the very fast growth of billionaires over time, 1987 to 2001, shows you that. So 2017 it's news, right? 1% grabbed 82% of all wealth created across the world. This is quite a interesting thing, right? So we are now 5-6 years away from this, and now this 1% would have grabbed more than 95% of it. And the income from the 60% of the middle class in the United States have become less than the top 1% holdings. This crossover happened before some time. And in India, the bottom 60% holds just 13% of the wealth. So with such extreme inequality comes extreme social injustice, right? The wealthy dictates how the country is run because they own the government anyway, and even to the detriment of the rest because they don't care what happens to the rest of the people. They are more interested in making more money, just like you and me, right? They're not any different. Just that the scale is enormous, and their decisions make a huge impact on the society. But unfortunately, that effectively force slave labor on the majority of the people. Okay, and that results in overall slavery. I mean, it is invisible, but okay. So the main conduit of that happening is the fiat money, which is flowing and binding everything that we do today. So the most dominating force, United States, exited the gold standard in 1971 because they felt invincible, right? So everything that is there in United States, the dollar is just a promise that this is $1. That's it. There is no underlying value. For example, if you take 1 gram of gold, it does not have any counterparty risk. This $1, 1 gram of gold, you have in physical form, you can exchange it for goods and services anywhere across the world. There is no third party, somebody else who needs to be involved in your transactions. So that that is real money. The gold and silver and even all kind of resources, copper. So these are real money. But the dollar is just a fiat currency, right? It is just called fiat money. It is not backed by anything. It is just an empty promise that to pay the bearer the sum of $1. It doesn't mean a thing totally. And unfortunately, that has become the dominant currency and the reserve currency across the world. And almost all developing and developed nations are pegging their own currencies on dollar reserves. Okay, so India has pegged 90% of its currency on dollar. So if there is a decline in dollar, India will be, the Indian currency will devalue greatly. So not only that, through the fractional reserve lending, the banks, banks are allowed to create more and more money, currency basically, and lend it out, which in turn earns real world interest in the real values and flow back into the banks, right? So if you let the banks do this to infinity, then they themselves will destroy the whole economy through inflation. The currency will inflate to infinity. So usually there is a reservation requirement for banks. So they can keep doing this fractional reserve lending. It really means that if the bank has about $10, it can lend out 10 times of it, over $100. In India, it is 20 times nearly. So it is like it can, with a $10 deposit, if you give it to the bank can create a loan for $200. So that is what fractional reserve lending really means. So where is that other extra money coming from? It comes from nothing. It just comes from thin air. They just type in those numbers in a computer and they create the loan. And the loan gets transferred to other banks. And then the banks manage the transfer of this fake money, or what do you say, the out of money created out of thin air among themselves. And that is given to the masses, and the masses take that money and treat it as real money, and they pay the real interest on that money. So the money coming in from the masses is real because that money is generated through hard work and goods and services, right? So that is real, and that is how the banking system works overall. They consume the labor and intelligent labor and the resources of the world to enlarge themselves. So there is a major thing that happened recently is that the Federal Reserve has completely removed the reserve requirements. So when you remove these reserve requirements, the banks are free to create money to any extent they would like to have. So India has not done that yet. I mean, we still have fairly decent reserve requirements for the bank so that the banks are reined in. But our FRL conversion rate is very high, nearly about 20 times. But United States is about 10 times. So what has happened is that it is a free for all. Now banks can go ahead and create all kind of, I mean, whole lot of money out of thin air, right? So this inflates the currency because the more money you create and lend it out as loans, it increases the currency circulation in the country, and then the inflation happens. And of course, when the currency gets inflated, the rich gets most of it, which means there is a wealth transfer that happens. So this is the most important development that has happened in recent times. So this happened in around March timeframe in 2020, when the COVID crisis hit. They used that crisis to remove these Federal Reserve requirements, right? In fact, the fake COVID was created for this. This is the real purpose. Economy always is the center stage. Money is always the center stage. The rest is all just illusion and play. And even Forbes has said that this is a big bomb. Okay, so all major crises, right, such as the Meda crisis recently, so they all help to concentrate wealth more and more, and it accelerates it. So workers around the world lost 3.7 trillion in the so-called pandemic. But billionaires around the world, they gained over 3.9 trillion in the pandemic. So during that period, it is the biggest 1 year wealth transfer in human history. I mean, the recent human history, right? But nobody talks about it because nobody knows about it. Nobody publishes anything, right? So if you break it down, Amazon, Walmart, Google, Microsoft, Facebook, all the top ones, they have been gaining so many billions of dollars because more and more businesses are going online and people are spending more and more time and resources with these companies. And all the most of the small businesses were decimated, and they have collectively lost over 200 billion in the United States alone. So again, this is a massive. This was a massive wealth transfer, and it is continuing even now. So in India, that is the same case in India also. In India's richest doubled their wealth to over 720 billion during the COVID crisis. So let us see about compounding, right? Because compounding actually destroys civilization. So you know about compounding interest, but you may not have here. I mean, have a good idea of how it is so detrimental to civilization itself. Because charging interest on money leads to compounding, because that is how it is. That is, people always want more and more return. So the compounding effect increases the amount of interest expected exponentially, right? So debtors are expected to give exponential returns over time. But if you look at the natural resources and goods and services, these do not grow exponentially. Okay, so if you take a loan to create a mango farm, okay, the mango produced from the farm will, I mean, grow. It will grow. The output will grow incrementally year over year. Okay, it's a small amount incremental. But the interest that you need to pay for the debt you have taken to create the mango farm, they demand compounding interest, right? You will have to pay exponentially increasing interest for that debt. So this debt is impossible to serve because you cannot catch up with the return that you generate from natural resources and things from human effort, because compounding interest will always catch up with it, increase the inflation and exceed that. So that only way for you to repay that kind of demand is to exploit other people and pay them less so that you can pay your compound interest to the bank. And you exploit not only other people and the natural resources as well. So what is the result? I mean, this results in massive inflation of the currency and great extreme inequality in the societies and wars, because beyond your time, beyond your point, you cannot do anything other than creating conflict in the society, right? And currency resets, the complete social disintegration and the great resets. Okay, so as such, compounding is one of the greatest curses that we have as a society, and which is driven by the human greed fundamentally. So only an interest-free economy can break this curse, such as what happened with Germany in early 1990s when Hitler drove out all the bankers out of the country, and he created cooperative banks which gave out interest-free loan. Within 3 years, the Germany became the best economy in the world from a rock bottom. And same thing happened in Libya and Chile and many other countries. But in modern times, wherever this was happening, immediately the central bankers go into the country, destroy the leader and his regime, and they declare them as what do you say, um, the evil forces, because they own the media and they tell people what to believe. So people believe all that, and that country goes through a great reset and become enslaved. So to understand how that inflation game really works, right? So the government keeps on printing to service ever increasing debt. So all government keep on borrowing money and they keep on spending it to what do you say, service the people. But this can never be repaid. Okay, so I mean, trillions of dollars is being borrowed, but there is no way they can going to repay that. So what they do is they keep on printing more and more money, so that they inflate and give repay the debt. Okay, so when they print new money, this money is given to the close allies of the government. So such as the private sector undertakings, then the banks, large banks, then very large corporations, and so on and so forth. So this money goes to them first, and then they actually percolate it uh, down below, and they usually put it into banks, and then the banks multiply it through fractional reserve lending and circulate it into the real economy, and which earns interest from people. And this new money eventually will find its way into high risk assets such as stocks and crypto and so on and so forth, because it is all coming free for the people at the top. So they invest that money into high risk, high return ventures. But if you really look at it, what happens is this leads to higher prices because people at the top now can afford to pay higher and higher prices for the real world assets. But the people below, they cannot afford that. They are holding the old money, and their economy works much, much slower. So the wealth divide increases between the wealthy and the poor. Okay, so overall prices are driven much higher in the economy, and the masses have the same amount of money as before. So they become poorer essentially. So that is how inflation makes the purchasing power lower for poorer people and higher for richer people. So as such, when governments inflate currency, that is actually theft. You are stealing from the middle class and the poorer class and percolating it all the way up the hierarchy of the economy. So USA printed over 6 trillion in the last 2 years. And that is like, to set the context, 2 times of India's GDP. And they gave very small amount, like $2,000, $4,000 to the masses. So they were very happy to get it in their checks, and they're so happy. But most of the money has gone to the top, and that has helped to inflate the currency, to make the poor people even poorer. So this inflation, when it happened in United States in 2021, right? So from 2%, which is typically the expected inflation, CPI is Consumer Price Index. So inflation. So this touched double of 2.6%, 2%, around to 4.2%. At that time, the Federal Reserve came out and said that, yeah, this is transitory. So don't worry, this will very soon it will go away. But unfortunately, it didn't go away, right? It kept on increasing, 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 and it has touched over 8%. At this point, they said it is all fault of Russia invading Ukraine, right? That was really funny. And the United States government actually came out and said that. But it has nothing to do with Ukraine or any wars. It is fundamental economical factors which are driving this again. Now, since then, they have started increasing the interest rate and trying to rein in this inflation. But it is not possible, because it is going to worsen the situation. You will see that. Now, if you look at the wages, they said it is wages are rising nicely to 5.8%, right, from the previous year. So the solution to higher wages is higher wages. Fine, but it will never catch up with the inflation. If you really look at the real numbers, the wages increased by around 5%, but the inflation grew at 7%, which really means the average worker has got a pay cut of 2.4% in real terms. So this is what happened in the United States, and it's the same case across the world. It is not only in the United States, right? So people actually became poorer, and the wealth concentration put more money in the wealthy people's hands. So even in India, the inflation really shot through the roof, and it continues to go quite much higher. So 11% in March 2022, right? So uh, and even the projections are going to get revised very soon, because the RBI just lies to people about the inflation all the time. So if you look at the broad money supply, M3 in the hands of people across the world, there are so many countries, right? Everybody has increased the money supply like crazy over a very short period of time. And this is not going to be sustainable. And the wealth concentration increases because of this. And even in India, so you can see that it has been always been increasing the money supply, and the crisis has increased it even more. So all of this is going to lead to only one thing, which is a huge recession, because there is nothing in the economy; it is all hollow. The real values cannot keep up with the currency inflation and the corresponding very high values of everything, right? So a recession with high inflation seems to be coming, and that is going to result in a, stock market crash and overall economic crash. But it's very difficult to predict when that is going to happen, because if United States continues to inflate away the currency and all other countries keep on doing that, so they may keep pushing this timeline further and further. But it only helps to inflate the bubble even to bigger sizes. So but unfortunately, unlike the Paul Walker's regime in 1980s, when he actually took over the Federal Reserve and with an iron hand, he raised the interest rates to double digits and then brought down the inflation. But we cannot do that anymore, because it has become so interlinked, that international currencies and the economies are so much interlinked. You cannot, United States cannot do it anymore. And not only that, because the economies are already slowing down, unlike 1980s. So if you continue to raise interest rate, it will reduce the amount of money circulating in people's hands. And so people become, what do you say, they cannot do more and more transactions, and the velocity of the money reduces, and they cannot grow the economy fast. So you cannot really keep on raising the interest rate and make the currency too expensive. But if you lower the interest rate for too long, then what happens is it increases the inflation. Too much of currency starts circulating in the economy, which increases the wealth divide between the rich and the poor. And the wealth concentrates faster and faster in fewer and fewer hands. And if people can see it in plain sight, then they are going to rebel again. There is going to be a huge revolution like the French Revolution or revolutions before that. So we can't go there either, right? So basically, it is stuck between a rock and a hard place. You cannot go anywhere. So the real smooth landing is to crash everything over time or create a war, or you improve things fundamentally, provide more goods and services and increase the resources that you get from ground, and so on and so forth. But this is again reaching a saturation point. You cannot really go beyond what is already maxing out, right? So I mean, many it is common knowledge among banks and the super rich. So Bank of America has already warned that inflation shock is really coming. You can read so many articles about this. So the bond markets are more interesting because that is where money flows happen. Okay, stock market in comparison to bond market is really small. The bond markets is where the a lot of money gets changes hands. Okay, and the bond markets uses the reserve currency of the world today, which is the United States dollar, and mostly it is through treasury notes and government bonds from the United States. The bond, that is what bond market is all about, right? So when the United States rose to domination, so all the international bond markets which were trading across themselves with various denomination currencies, they started standardizing with the dollar. So this brought a lot of stability and maturity into the international markets, and it really expanded quite a lot. And shortly after that, the euro dollar market evolved because the banks in Europe, they started creating dollars out of thin air through fractional reserve lending and hedging the United States government bonds and treasury notes. So there is a separate market called the euro dollar has evolved. And today, the euro dollar market has become much larger than the original dollar market. So because of that one, people started using the euro dollar to hedge their risk through derivatives, right? Futures and options markets, and this market has also grown massively. So what it has created is a huge financial system across the world, uh, which is like extremely weak. The whole ecosystem is built on derivatives and the returns from derivatives, very fast money exchanges at very large quantities, with nothing supporting the whole thing. It is very fragile. And with one treasury bond, treasury note may lead to $1 trillion, what do you say, expansion into this market. So when you pull out that one treasury bond, the whole thing comes crashing down. People cannot serve the expectations, right? So with very little collateral, a whole lot of promises are being made. So this makes the entire ecosystem very fragile. And this uh, this actually expresses itself into the 10-year bond yield. This is a very good indicator of the risk. And the bond yield goes up. So your bond is nothing but a promise to pay certain amount after 10 years. Okay, so if there is $100 worth of bond of 10 years, it says after 10 years, I will give you $150. That is the promise of the bond. So people sell this bond in the open market. They keep exchanging this bond. As the current interest rate goes up and down, the bond yield also goes up and down. So when the economy is not doing well, people move their money into low risk assets such as government bonds. So what happens is the demand for bond goes up and the bond yield also goes up. So usually the short-term bond yield is lesser than the long-term bonds for obvious reasons because they have more, they carry more value and more stability, right? But when the yield curve inverts, right, when short-term bonds start yielding more returns, it really means that people have no idea what is going to happen in future. Their confidence on longer term bond becomes less, and so they move their money into shorter term bonds. This leads to the inversion of the yield curve, and it is an excellent indicator of the incoming recession. So, over the past 100 years or so, the yield curve inversion has clearly predicted the incoming recession. So right now, our yield curve is heavily inverted, right? So if you look at it, 2020, it has inverted, and that is when the crisis was started, right? And from that time onwards, we are actually in a small recession, but I don't think we have not seen anything yet. So this recession is going to explode into much bigger, deeper issue. And also another excellent indicator of recessions and poor economy, right? That is this Buffett indicator. It is simply the ratio between the market value and the GDP of a country. So typically, it is a historical trend line for a Buffett indicator is about 125%. That seems to be the fair value. But whenever the Buffett indicator goes above that, it indicates a correction. It indicates a market correction. You can see that in 2000, which is a major crash. You can see that it has exceeded quite a lot and crashed down. And then even 2008 crash over here, you can see a massive crash below. So right now, this is at the highest ever. The Buffett indicator is as of last year, and it has become even worse now in 2023. It's nearly 200%, which is completely unsustainable. Okay, so these things actually indicate deep recession incoming. Okay, so that said, right now the world is actually divided and polarized into two groups, right? On one side you have United States and European Union and all the assorted countries. On the other side, there are countries like BRICS nations, Russia, China, India, then Saudi Arabia, Iran, Japan, and a few of their Asian allies. They are on one side. Okay, so this unfortunately, all the resources, the real world resources, are concentrated on the second group. Okay, so even the purchasing power of these resources are concentrated on the second group. Okay, so they are, but everybody is pegged on dollar right now. So they are now locked on to United States economy. But because of owning resources, they are very unlikely to continue that false dependency, right? So they are very likely to form their own currency, which is again likely to be based on gold or silver or an assortment of precious metals and other resources. But at this point in time, neither the ruble, the Russian currency, or the Chinese currency by itself has enough purchasing power and large enough bond markets to become a dominant world reserve currency itself. But they are getting there together, right? If they stay together and United States, continues its downward trend on dollars, they are likely to form their own currency. So unless the United States succeeds in pulling the entire world into a World War III, it is a really game over for the United States and the European Union, which is extremely dependent on the United States and so on, because they are self-destructing over time, and this is not reversible. So this is another major development. So Russia has recently pegged its ruble to gold in a game-changing move, and now ruble is pegged on gold, right? So it is as good as when you exchange currency with Russia, it is as good as exchanging gold, which has no third-party risk. So this is very significant, right? It really means the Russian oil, which is being bought over by India, is also pegged to gold. It is no longer pegged on a false, inflatable, fake resource such as United States dollars. So this price standardization is going to ripple through Russia's allies and whoever is having trading with Russia. This standardization is going to ripple through that and standardize everything practically, right? So this is going to dramatically cut down the domination of petrodollar across the world. And sooner or later, United States and European Union, they also have to peg it similarly, because otherwise nobody will be trading with these countries anymore, because there is no standardization and the confidence on dollar is diminishing. Okay, that is a very important development, which actually goes to show the fragility of dollar. So if there is a conflict that comes in, if the United States tries to uh, build up a war, for example, with China, or expand the war with Russia through Ukraine, right? What is going to happen? Nothing much, because the United States is in no position to go to war with anybody, practically speaking. Even though United States has the largest army, armed forces, over nearly $1 trillion, which is much larger than the next 9 countries all put together. It is larger than that. But this is not really giving you the right picture. To run such a massive armed forces, they need a lot of resources, right? Raw materials and resources. And they no longer dominate or monopolize these resources. So what are these resources? You have petroleum, steel, natural gas, copper, fertilizers for food, ammonia, and rare earth metals, and especially semiconductors, right? These are the lifeblood of today's world economies. And even to maintain their military power, they need all these things. But if you look at who is owning all these things, the United States is nowhere near the very top. Of course, for petroleum, right now it is in a dominating position, and so are the other countries, right? Saudi Arabia and Russia are very close, and other countries may be increasing to that one. And if you look at the steel production, you have number one is again China, India, Japan, and United States is only fourth. And if United States creates a conflict with any of these or their allies, they're shooting themselves in the foot, because they are not going to get the supply from of steel from these countries. And same case goes for natural gas production. And the United States right now is dominating, but Russia is catching up fast. Iran, China, Qatar, Canada, Australia, and these are like very close in the opposing group. And the fertilizer giant, if you look at it, it is Canada and Russia, Belarus, China again. China and Russia are dominating fertilizer giants, because they control the food supply in real terms. Because without these fertilizers, you can't even grow food in the pace in which it is commercially viable. And copper is the most important material for the modern economies, because without copper, the electric revolution, the electric transportation revolution, which is currently going on, it cannot go, it cannot happen. But if you look at who is dominating in copper production, it is Chile, Peru, and Congo, and China, and United States. Even though the production is happening in Chile, Peru, and Congo, it is actually China which is dominating. Because if you look at the news and dig little deeper, China has become number one import partner for Chile, right? So China is all over Chile. It is dominating the copper supplies, and so is Peru. And if you look at the trade with China, has more than doubled over time. And many of the ports in Peru are actually owned and operated by China. And if you look at Congo again, China is a major investor in the country. So in terms of copper, United States and their European allies have already lost the game. They can no longer recover this because China is all over the place, and so are the China's allies, right? If you look at the ammonia production, again, it's very critical for food and lot of chemicals. China and Russia dominate. The United States is a really small third position, and India is again very close to United States. And all the rare earth metals without which none of these electric vehicles can operate, right? So if you look at it, they are all dominated by China again. Vietnam, Brazil, Russia, India, Australia, and United States is nowhere in the top 5 or 6, right? They are really way down. And if there is a conflict between United States and these countries, in what way the United States can dominate? It cannot. And the same case with integrated circuits and semiconductors, right? China is number one by a huge margin. And there are only South Korea, Singapore, Malaysia, and so on. And the United States is fourth over here. And very closely followed by Japan, Germany, Philippines, and other countries. And in terms of the most important semiconductor thing is the hard disk drives, because hard drive, these are absolute necessity for the modern economies to actually work, function. And again, the top 3 exporters of hard drives are China, Thailand, and Philippines, right? And China is the largest exporter of hard drive, period. So you cannot really go mess up anything with China. And that is the real side of the story, right? The United States and allies are dependent on the other side for resources. So if there is any conflict between these two sides, and United States has absolutely no chance of winning anything, and they should be very happy to maintain the status quo. Okay, so but the masses are being hypnotized with the superpower status of United States. It is not really the real picture. It is all just cartoons and the mental programming of the masses. Okay, so yeah, a few words on the manufactured energy crisis, right? Because the more the population increases, you need more and more energy. So any disruption to the energy systems actually decrease the standard of living. Okay, so if the wealth concentration is to continue, um, they have to cut down the current energy levels because of the population increase. Okay, so that poor becomes poorer they are kept under control. That is the bottom line. And that is why that the World Economic Forum has been warning about threat to energy systems and so on, because they are going to pull the plug on everybody. Um, but it is also the green energy, which they have been talking about, it is in the same direction. So if you look at historically, whenever a new energy system comes in, such as coal, oil, and so on, they always add to existing energy supply. But the green energy initiatives which are being talked about now, they propose to replace a part of the supply, and they are not adding anything to it. So this is a nice graph. If you look at from 1800s to till today, the traditional biomass such as wood burning that has been here, and the coal got added in 1800s, and that dramatically increased the amount of energy available. And later on, this energy from the oil uh, added to that one, and later gas got added, and the nuclear power got added, and right now the the renewable energy has been growing. So if you look at historically, the energy of the new fuel type, the new technology is always adding, but this is a very first time in human history where we are trying to replace traditional amount of energy with a new type of energy called renewables. I'm not sure how that is going to work out. It is going to reduce the amount of energy that is available for the population growth. And the correlation between the population and energy consumption is absolutely straightforward. So as the population grows, so is the energy being consumed by the population. So if there is not enough energy, the population is going to reduce and they're going to starve, and the civilization as such will go down, and the quality of life also goes down dramatically. Uh, so that is what this World Economic Forum is talking about. Okay, so they are been warning that history is truly at a turning point, and the global energy and food systems will be deeply affected because they are looking to reset everything. Because the wealth concentration has reached enormous proportion that a revolution across the world is very difficult to avoid anymore. So they are trying to bring in a huge reset without violent conflicts and continue their domination of the masses. Okay, so that is what they are talking about. Now, as I said, the real matrix is this, right? The super rich desire more and more for themselves, just like you and me. You cannot blame them for that because it is the very human greed which has taken hold of the entire society and communities. And unfortunately, this is the only way to lead a meaningful life for them. And these very small group of people, they already control most of the governments and so on and so forth. And but on the other side, humans are born sovereign by nature, right? They are born free. You can't dominate everybody over all the time. They are going to break free sooner or later. So there's a constant tug of war and a struggle for the people at the top to maintain their control. And naturally, wealth serves as a major means of that control. The entertainment through sports and television and that intense entertainment through everything. So that is the main weapon and the main means of control to keep the population engaged and weak, so that nobody really go and explore what is really going on and try to understand anything, right? So as such, we are at a stage where everything is handed over to experts. Absolutely everything. Nobody takes care of even their own health. If you go and talk to somebody about any subject, sooner or later they say, "Oh, I am not an expert, you know. I mean, I don't know. So you ought to ask an expert." It has reached such a pathetic stage. I thought this meme captures it so well. Is it really raining? People are standing in rain. And then that guy replies, I don't know really. I'm not a meteorologist. So this is the kind of handing over of all human intelligence and power over to so-called experts. This is the wrong direction we are going. So what is the way ahead in these kind of extraordinary times? So the first thing is you need to safeguard yourself from incoming inflation, right? So for that, you need to shift your savings into inflation resistant assets, which is gold, silver, farmland, and so on, real world assets, and reduce your dependency on centralized systems and supply chains. For example, if you are living in a city, try to move to the outskirts of the city or to move on to a town where you have local supply chains. Instead of depending on the supermarket, go to a place where there is the supply chain is local and you know the people who are producing the food you eat basically, and try to form local communities wherever you are, so that with like-minded people who know what is really going on, so that you have a what do you say, better chance of surviving when things go really deep south. So if this requires shifting of your current location, do it, because the world is anyway a big place. You have no loyalty to one place. If you want to shift, you shift, and you should really explore and understand how the world is working today, and understanding the economy at both at macro and micro level, and how money works. So this is absolute key to survive the incoming hardships. And you should really take ownership of your own health. Okay, so I'll talk about this later on, but you should explore really the traditional medicines and as much as possible completely reduce your dependency on allopathy and the related, the so-called healthcare industry. Yeah, an industry which depends on you being sick to earn money, there is no way that industry is going to serve your uh, needs, really. Okay, and you should prepare the next generation by empowering them with real knowledge of all these things, what is really going on, because the next generation is going to face extraordinary times and extraordinary pressures. I mean, really a hard time incoming, right? So we need to at least have uh, we have to tell them that okay, this is what is coming in. At least that much we should be able to do. And you should really keep away from television. That is my advice. I mean, if you want to take away one thing, I would suggest to do this, that you should really stay away from television. Throw that thing out. As long as you keep watching television, you will always be under a trance. This is human psychology, and they have been exploiting it for so long, right? It is not possible for anyone to wake up to what is going on if they watch television, period. There is no counter argument to that one. And you should really limit your social media time, because this social media is actually breaking up everything. The society is being broken up by the social media. So I am not saying that. The very people who created the social media, they themselves are saying that. So let me play a small clip on that one, right? From Sean Parker. He is who created the.
When Facebook was getting going, I had these people who would come up to me and they would say, you know, I'm not on social media. And I would say, okay, you know, you will be. And then they would say, no, I value my real life interactions. I value the moment. I value presence, and I value intimacy. And I would say, well, you're a conscientious objector. That's okay. You don't have to participate, but you know, we'll get you eventually. and like, I don't know if I really understood the consequences of what I was saying. Because the unintended consequences of a network when it grows to 1 billion or 2 billion people, and it literally changes your relationship with society, with each other, with you know, it probably interferes with productivity in weird ways. God only knows what it's doing to our children's brains. You know, if the thought process that went into building these applications, Facebook being the first of them to really understand it, that thought process was all about how do we consume as much of your time and conscious attention as possible. And that means that we need to sort of give you a little dopamine hit every once in a while because someone liked or commented on a photo or a post or whatever. And that's going to get you to contribute more content, and that's going to get you, you know, more likes and comments. I mean, it's a social validation feedback loop that it's like it's exactly the kind of thing that a hacker like myself would come up with, because you're exploiting a vulnerability in human psychology. And I think that the inventors, creators, you know, and it's me, it's Mark, it's Kevin Systrom at Instagram, it's all of these people, understood this consciously, and we did it anyway.
That culture is missing here.
True.
Basically. Are unpredictable, and so we want to psychologically figure out how to manipulate you as fast as possible and then give you back that dopamine hit. We did that brilliantly at Facebook. Instagram has done it. WhatsApp has done it. You know, Snapchat has done it. Twitter has done it. So there are great examples. WeChat is doing it. There are great examples of failing fast is the right path to exploiting psychology of mass populations of people.
I want to bring us back to the point that you were making about exploiting consumer behavior in a consumer internet business. you said that this is a time for soul searching in social media businesses, and you were part of building the largest one. What soul searching are you doing right now on that?
I feel tremendous guilt. I think we all knew in the back of our minds, even though we feigned this whole line of like there probably aren't any really bad unintended consequences. I think in the back, deep recesses of our minds, we kind of knew something bad could happen. But I think the way we defined it was not like this. It literally is a point now where I think we have created tools that are ripping apart the social fabric of how society works. That is truly where we are. And I would encourage all of you, as the future leaders of the world, to really internalize how important this is. If you feed the beast, that beast will destroy you. If you push back on it, we have a chance to control it and rein it in. And it is a point in time where people need to hard break from some of these tools and the things that you rely on. The short-term dopamine-driven feedback loops that we have created are destroying how society works. No civil discourse, no cooperation, misinformation, mistruth. And it's not an American problem. This is not about Russian ads. This is a global problem. So we're in a really bad state of affairs right now, in my opinion. It is eroding the core foundations of how people behave by and between each other. And I don't have a good solution. My solution is I just don't use these tools anymore.
So there you go. You heard it from the horse's mouth. So these are the people who created all this social media. Okay, so that's it for today. So these are some of the channels I would suggest you watch. George Gammon, Mark Mas, Neil McCoy Watt. So these guys who put out great content in terms of macroeconomics. Okay, the first one is my channel. All right. So that's it, and thank you for watching.